Today we're going to assemble these delicious looking cake jars. From left to right we have a birthday funfetti cake, a Snickers chocolate overload, and a delicious strawberry cake with a homemade strawberry filling. To get started you're going to need to select 3 different cakes, choose your favorite brand and flavors, follow the directions on the back of the box for each cake. For this project I suggest using a 9x13 inch baking dish lined with foil. Reason being, once the first cake is done you can easily pop out the first cake, line the pan again, load it up with the next flavor, and keep on baking. I baked all 3 of my cakes before moving on to the next step. While the cakes are baking, we need to wash the mason jars. I picked up this pack of 12 from my local Walmart. Each one is half a pint, which I think is the perfect size for individual cakes, especially if these are for a kid's party. It holds just the right amount of sugar to send those birthday guests up the wall when they get home. The only thing I didn't take into consideration when purchasing these was the quilted pattern on the jars. As you can see here, it does sort of distort the layers a bit. It's not a huge deal, but if it does bother you, keep that in mind when you go to buy yours. Now there are a couple of ways you can go about filling your cake jars. Some people like to use cookie cutters or biscuit cutters. For me, I think the easiest way is to crumble up the cake in a gallon Ziploc baggie like so, especially if you have a ton of these to fill. And whatever you don't use for this project, you can turn into cake pops later. We're gonna start off with a birthday funfetti themed cake. Grab your clean mason jar and spoon in about 3 spoonfuls of cake, or however much cake you want. It's really up to you. Since our cake is nice and fluffy, we need to pat it down a bit and get as much air out as possible. This looks good. Our next layer is going to be a layer of frosting. I'm going with vanilla, and yes, it's from a can. If you have the time to make homemade frosting, then by all means use that. I'm using a number 12 piping tip. You could of course spoon it in if you want, but I feel like this is much less messy. If you don't have a piping bag, a sturdy Ziploc bag should work. Start off by piping a ring of frosting. We're going to add in our sprinkles and try to get them to land between the frosting and the jar so that they're visible on the outside. Once you've added in enough sprinkles, fill in the center with more frosting. It doesn't have to look pretty, nobody's gonna see that part. Add in your second layer of cake and pat it down again. And here you can see our layers are starting to take shape. Now it's time to add in a little bit of chocolate syrup. If chocolate isn't your thing, really any flavor will work. Grab a chopstick or even a toothpick will work and press down into the cake, making holes along the edges of your cake where the cake meets the jar. The idea is the chocolate will drip down into the holes and add a little extra design to the exterior look. Now if this does seem like it's too time consuming for you, that's totally fine. This does not make or break the cake. Now comes our final layer of cake. Again, pat it down so our friends and family get as much cake as possible. Be sure to leave some room for the final layer of frosting. Pipe on your frosting, making sure we're sealing in all of that delicious cake. Grab a spoon and using the back, we're gonna smooth out that frosting so it looks nice and clean. If you have a fancy piping tip, now would be the best time to swap that in. Grab some sprinkles and cover the top. To give the cake a little height, break an Oreo cookie in half and place it on top. And that completes our birthday cake. Our next cake is the Snickers chocolate overload. We're gonna start by chopping up these fun-sized Snicker bars. The smaller you chop them, the better. Also be sure to leave some hole to decorate the top at the end. Same as before, add in a few spoonfuls of cake and pat it down. I'm using chocolate frosting, and since I'm not using sprinkles for this cake, I'm piping it straight up to the glass jar. No need to be all pretty about it, just squeeze her in there like so. Next is a generous layer of Snickers. You can place the cut side of the candy bar against the jar so it's visible from the outside like this. It is a little time consuming, but the result is kind of cute. I did the outside like this and then just dumped the rest in the middle since that part isn't visible. Add in your second layer of cake and give it the old pat down. Just like with the birthday cake, we're gonna poke a few holes and add in our caramel sauce. Now this might not have the same effect since the caramel is so close in color to the chocolate. I'm pretty sure it's just gonna get absorbed into the cake, but at least that layer of cake will have a nice caramely taste to it. You could always add a layer of frosting instead if caramel isn't your thing. And next is our third and final layer of cake, again leaving some room for the final layer of frosting. Pipe on your frosting, smooth it out, and add on your candies just around the edges. And for the center, take your candy bar, slice it in half, and stick each half into the frosting crisscross-like. And that is the Snickers chocolate overload cake. For our third and final cake, we have the strawberry cake. We're gonna start by making the filling. Into a pan over medium-high heat, add in 1 cup of sugar, 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. This will help thicken the filling, and 3/4 cup of water. Give that a quick stir until everything looks relatively well mixed in. Add in 2 cups of diced strawberries, strawberries. We're gonna let this come to a boil and then boil for 3 minutes, stirring constantly. This is a very simple and easy strawberry filling recipe. There are a ton of recipes out there, so if you're not filling this one, pick any one you want. It's no big deal. Whichever one you want to use is totally fine. Once the 3 minutes are up, transfer the strawberries to a bowl to cool. If you are planning on doing all 3 cakes, I would suggest making this strawberry filling first because it does take a while to cool. Our first layer will be a couple spoonfuls of cake. Pat that down. The next layer is our completely cooled strawberry filling. If you're worried about getting the filling in places you don't want it on the inside walls of the jar, drop it directly down into the center. It will naturally spread out to the edges, leaving your sides looking nice and clean. Add in another layer of cake, and when you pat that layer down, be a little more gentle about it. You don't want the strawberry filling to seep up to the top layer from too much pressure. Our next layer is going to be some of this delicious Cool Whip. Yum, I love this stuff. You don't need a piping tip or a piping bag for this. It's light enough you can use a regular sandwich baggie and not worry about it busting on you. Give it a good squeeze. You want a nice thick layer. Add a layer of strawberry filling. This is why you want completely cooled filling. I can't imagine what warm filling would do to Cool Whip. It won't be pretty. By now there won't be too much room for another real third layer of cake. It's pretty full at this point. You might just have enough room to sprinkle on a tiny layer of cake. And if you remembered to save a few strawberries to garnish on top, place them on top. I wasn't thinking and didn't save any. Very unfortunate. I guess I'll top mine with a blob of filling. And there you have it, 3 delicious cake jars. If you're planning on making these for a party, you can definitely make them the night before and store them in the fridge. The birthday one and the Snickers one don't really need to be refrigerated as they don't have anything in them that will spoil. The strawberry one, however, does have some Cool Whip in it. I would suggest keeping that one in the fridge and then letting it come to room temperature just before your event. If you're interested, I will insert an ingredients list right here. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, I hope you give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out, and I'll see you all in the next video.